Okay, many thanks to all of you for staying on. It was an interesting, indeed sometimes exhilarating day, I think. I hope it was that for you too. The great pleasure of being at the very end of the program is that you can come back to what has been said before by a great number of people who have been spending a lot of time in thinking about the subject of democracy in that case. Let me start off with two questions to you. One question is easy, and I think I know the answer. To the other question, I know the answer, but I would like to know if you know it. The first question is, who of you owns a smartphone? Please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Who of you owns two smartphones? Please raise your hand. Okay, not so bad. 3? Ah, okay, okay, the real fans. That's okay. Okay, the more complicated question. The richest person on earth is the CEO, the founder of Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, or Microsoft. I take the votes. The richest person on earth is the founder of Google. Who's for that? Nope. Amazon? Not bad. Facebook? Apple? That was a trick question. I agree. Microsoft? Good. Okay. To my absolute delight, the absolute majority of votes went to the right person. It's Jeff Bezos. The second richest person in the world is the founder of Google. Please, for your votes. Facebook. Microsoft. Apple, oh yeah, we discard Apple. Okay, you got the second one right too. That's Microsoft. This was the result of the latest Forbes magazine's research. So I would like you to take away from these questions two things. One is in your pocket, you have artificial intelligence. In all of your pockets are machines that are bundles of technologies that we would call artificial intelligence if we use it in a broad way, the term. Second message, you can make money with it, obviously, can't you? Okay, you keep that in mind with what comes next. What comes next actually is not so surprising for you because you have been seeing a number of Freedom House graphics already before. You didn't see this one, I think. What it shows is the countries which are politically free, and you can see that a part of the world is politically free. You heard about it, they have dozens of indicators that are behind that, so this looks like, you know, a child can draw that. No, a child can't draw that. This is decades of experience and dozens of indicators, they're doing really good work. And the violet part, as you would have guessed, is the countries that are not free politically. Now, freedom, as we have heard before, is one of the key terms of democracy, obviously. It decides if you can have a say in how you would like to live, or you can't. Now, the really interesting question to me is, and it has been posed in another way already before, although you didn't see the cover of the books that we have been discussing. The really interesting question for me is, I'm old enough, a few of you also have gray hairs, they have been old enough too, and they have been around in 1989. With all the optimism that we had in 1989, what would happen next? The fourth wave, so to speak, of democratization. How did we end here, right? You have seen this one. Mr. Janishek showed you another version of it. It's the question of net gains and net declines in democratic quality of Freedom House. And for the first time since the Second World War, we have seen a persistent net decline in the quality of democratic indicators on a global scale, which is something we could keep in mind. And there's also something else that is interesting. It begins in 2006. This is 2 years before the financial crisis that ended up to be an economic crisis. So the explanation, in fact, that it was all an economic issue is a bit shaky. I think the answer to the question, or one answer to the question, there are I think many answers to it, is that we have been starting to disrespect the basis of democracies. Democracies, we have been hearing that before, already today, do not spring up naturally. There is no natural law that says that every political system in the world will end up as a democracy. We've heard that in 1989, in the early 90s, that this is the case. We have learned it's not true. The Europeans amongst us have surmised already in the early 1990s, and I recall when we were debating, I was a student in the United States back then, we were debating the American students and the European students, and the Europeans were already a little bit skeptical about that. Natural state of a state is a democracy. Okay. I'm arguing that democracies have a basis, and the basis is political, ecological, economic, social, and technological. It looks different in different countries because there are different political systems, different historical emergencies of systems, different cultures, etc. Nevertheless, there is a basis for democracies, and I would argue it's in these 5 steep factors. And also something I would like you to keep in mind that has been mentioned by the very first presentation today already. The battle cry of the French Revolution, the 3 dimensions of democracy, still carry some weight, right? Liberty, equality, freedom. Fraternity. Yes. It's not, yeah. I would argue that the basis of democracies that we are seeing nowadays in the rich part of the world is the welfare state. It is that kind of state that makes it possible that if you get unemployed, you're not out on the street, and if you have a family, after eating up what you have stored in terms of money or in terms of food, you are out on the street and you have to find, literally out on the street, as it was 120 years before, and you have to find new work or your children will die. Or you will die. Whoever will die first. Who cares? Other than perhaps the church back then. So it also keeps people into politics, because if you have to search for work 16 hours a day, you're not likely to read the newspaper or look into the internet or whatever. So it keeps you the possibility, if you get some basic funding from the state, to be a political person, to stay political, right? So you can inform yourself. It's also an eminently important issue that we have not touched upon today that much. We have heard a number of very interesting presentations with I think, very important ideas. Also pertaining to voting. I think democratic innovations are very important. Voting systems are very important. But one issue we have not touched upon. Democracy works only if people are well informed. And to be well informed comes from both sides. It comes from education, we have been touching upon that, but it's also about the possibilities to get the knowledge, to gain knowledge. It's about these civic freedoms that we need for it. Okay, welfare state being the basis of democracy, and the problem, some of these we have been touching already before. The problems that are challenging the basis of the welfare state are manifold nowadays. Climate change, it's asking the question if there will be sustainability of life on the planet in a couple of decades. Neoliberalism, it's hollowing out the welfare state. Rising inequalities, the Gini coefficient is going way up. There's a problem that we have in the rich part of the world. We always had the problem in the poor part of the world, but now we have it in the rich part of the world also. This is something we have to take care of, because we know from research that democracies work with a certain inequality. That's okay, people can live with that. If you reach a certain level of inequality, a threshold level, then you are into troubles. Globalization, which we have been moaning about for decades, because it brought all kinds of problems to us, and it did, in fact. And for me personally, I thought it was very ironic that in 2015 the politicians were caught with their trousers down, because if you have been into social science, you have been reading books about globalization by that time for 20 years, and each one had a chapter for migration in it. But now we are facing deglobalization. All of a sudden we face the springing up of nationalist governments. And that's much worse, as we find out very quickly. It took us just a couple of years to find that out. And people who have been hating globalization before, now all of a sudden are in love with globalization, because they are beginning to see that deglobalization is much, much worse. Because there's always one party or one actor that is explaining that his crowd, people, race, whatever, is better than the rest. This is the essence of nationalism. And then there is the fourth kind of challenge that we are facing. And it comes with digitalization. It comes with what I would like to invest the large part of my presentation about: artificial intelligence. These are 4 different subsystems of society. And as I was saying, we are going to come back to these 3 dimensions. Okay, first of all, taking a short look at what we call artificial intelligence in a loose way, and a short look at what I would like to talk about and what I would like not to talk about today. What I would like to talk about is what I have been putting in red up here. It is this loose usage of the term: machines or computer programs learning to perform tasks requiring types of intelligence that have been or are performed nowadays by humans, right? In essence, what we are seeing right now, also in our smartphones, is very specialized forms of artificial intelligence. My Google Translator translates phrases of Czech into German or English, which is the only 2 languages that I really can master. And it can do that, but it cannot tell the difference between a car and a tree or the sun. So it's very intelligent because it speaks lots of languages in a way. But it's very stupid because it cannot tell the difference between a car and a tree. Come on, a 3-year-old can do that. Papa tree, Papa car, Google Translator can't do that. And machine learning programs are increasingly better at doing very specialized functions, like identifying skin cancer if they get a tissue sample, right? But this program still cannot differentiate between a car and a tree and the sun. So what I'm saying here is it's very specialized forms of machine learning and very specialized forms of artificial intelligence, so to speak, that we are seeing. And what I'm not going to talk about today is something that we should start thinking about, and we have started thinking about, luckily, or some people have, political science, I'm a political scientist, as such, has not, for example. We have been a little bit asleep. Because it's into the future. And we don't like to speak about the far future in political science. We like to speak about the things that are here and the things that have been, and we would like to try conclusions from what has been to the now. The present is super. 20 years, 30 years, 40 years into the future is not so super for us. So that's bad. Somebody should think about it, but we won't, because we don't have enough time. And another term is algorithmic decision-making. Algorithms, for our purposes, basically are computer programs. And it will turn up for a number of times. Very shortly, because obviously it's known to all of you, since you already can name me the richest person and the second richest person in the world who made money with similar technologies, with technologies, IT technologies, ICT. We face today quasi-monopolist platform economists. Most of them are US American, GAFA. We had these companies. Some are rising in China. In Europe, basically, we are standing by with some exceptions, taxi platforms and musical platforms, but not the decisive ones. And we are paying a price for it. On a daily basis, our firms are paying a price for it. Our governments are paying a price for it because the data is there. There is the algorithms are there, the experience is there, and not here. And these firms are building monopolies, basically, because they have all of this. They have all of the data, they have all of the experience, and all of the algorithms. And what happens is that monopolies, as we know from history, are not a good thing. Economists think that, and it is proven actually that this takes the play, that this is the case, that we are paying a price as consumers, and we are paying a price as political citizens, who are in danger of being infringed upon their rights to decide about the fate of the states in which they're living, i.e. their own fate. So now I would like to turn to these three central dimensions of democracy and the current usage of artificial intelligence. As I've been saying, I'm not talking about the generalized artificial intelligence that is capable of doing the skin tissue work, the Google translators work, and differentiating between a car, the sun, and the tree. That would be a general artificial intelligence, right? And that's in the future. We don't know how far, we don't know if it will turn up, but it might. Now, what we are facing right now is at least as interesting to me. What we are facing right now is that the welfare state is being hollowed out by artificial intelligence because of several reasons. These monopolies that are building at the moment are causing single-handedly, so it seems, things as an automatization that for the first time is not about blue-collar workers alone. It's not about the shop floor. This is not about mass industrialization. This is not about the 4T model. This is about white-collar. This is about journalists. This is about researchers. And this is about lawyers. So we are seeing the frittering away of parts of jobs that we until now have thought are safe from automatization. We see the crowdsourcing of microtasks, where people are doing activities and form a job model out of it without any form of social security. So if you're an Uber driver or if you're working on Amazon Mechanical Turk, it would be nice if you have a second job with social security. because if you don't, then you won't have a pension. If you won't have a pension, then if you're 70 years old and you cannot drive your car anymore, or 80 years old, you will knock on the door of the welfare state. And that will be very costly, and somebody will have to pay that. And that's also important. It's difficult to organize politically that kind of work. We see the problems with Uber drivers in California. We have seen problems, they are at least geographically united. That's not the case with crowdsourcing. We are seeing these problems within other parts of the economy. Now you might say, well, who cares about unions? Especially the employers will say that, but it's part of society. There are interests of employees that they should represent in one or another way. Liberty. If you're looking into the internet and if you're making data research by using Google, for example, as most of you are doing on a daily basis, at least I do, what you're hoping for is the same as what you're hoping for when you're looking into Facebook news or into other news sources. You're hoping for freely, uncensored results that are independent, neutral. There's nothing like objectivity in that sense, right? You don't even expect your newspaper to be objective in that sense of the word, but neutral, that would be perhaps something. Of course, that's not the case. We know it somehow. All of us do, but we use it anyway because it's the most easy way to gather information. It's just a great system. As a researcher, I'm exceedingly happy that something like Google search exists. This is great. This is making my job much easier. But it's very dangerous. And it shows you just what always happens when you have algorithmic decision-making and decision support systems. You're in danger of just using it and forgetting about what's behind it, forgetting that somebody's paying for the first hits in your Google search, forgetting that somebody can pay in Facebook your way, his way or her way into the news line. Forgetting that there are little programs that are looking over your shoulder and that are looking into the history of your browsing results. And you forget all these things, although you know them. And it does something with you if you forget it, because you treat the results as neutral, objective, uncensored. Mr. Janicek has been also pointing today already at the social bubble effects, right? These effects that you get in the social networks, always the things that the algorithm thinks you are interested in. And actually the algorithm knows better than you, because the algorithm is watching what you are looking for. Each second on the internet is being watched over by the algorithm, so he should know, right? Or she, who knows what an algorithm is. The problem is, of course, just because I have a certain political opinion does not mean that I would like to read only what caters to my political opinion if I'm a critical, enlightened citizen. I would like to see also the other side of the coin. Can I do that? Yes, you could. Of course you can. I mean, this is no dictatorship. Mark Zuckerberg is not telling you you have to read only that kind of part. You just have to look for, if you're a left-winger, then you have just to look for Donald Trump's news on his Facebook page or go to his Twitter channel, or you will do that once, twice, then you will say, oh my God, I can't stand this. If you're from the right wing, you can do the same thing. You just say, I like The Guardian, and then you get all these Guardian news. You will do this once or twice, and then you will say, that's not interesting me. And that's the danger of it. You know what's happening. You know what a social bubble is, but you nevertheless, simply in daily life, normally just go through your news, check them, and you read what you always have been thinking. as a real right-winger populist, you always have been thinking that foreigners are stupid, that foreigners are not good. You always have been thinking there's something like a Jewish conspiracy. You might always have been thinking that, or at least for the last couple of years, if you're a QAnon fan, that the global elite is eating children to rejuvenate themselves. Yeah, Jörg has been saying that. 38,000 people in Berlin a couple of weeks ago out on the street. Lots of QAnon fans in there. Germany and the United States of America, the two hotspots of QAnon. People asking them, what do you think about QAnon? And they say, get lost, you're part of the establishment, you're journalists, I hate you. And they showed them sometimes. So what we see here is the conspiracy theorists are totally right. We are being controlled. Just not the sense in the way that they think that we are controlled. It's not the deep state. It's no big conspiracy by the Freemasons, by the Jews, by the global elite, by whatever or whomever. We are being controlled by a business model. Because the only reason why we should enter social media from the perspective of Mark Zuckerberg, besides his idea of uniting the people and making it possible to have communication, which I believe he really has. I believe it, I really do. But besides that, he's mainly interested in keeping you in Facebook, because each second you are in Facebook, you know, it brings him money, which is okay. It's a business, right? It's a business. The question then is, what should we do? But before we turn to that, there is still equality. Now that's also an interesting one. Because if you think how algorithms are working, what they're doing is they are classifying data. They are processing data, they are trying to predict where the data points are going to move in the next evolution of the game, right? So what they're doing is, if you have a crowd of people like you, they're classifying you. Some are older, some are a little bit more old even, some are much younger, some are female, some are male, some might be gay, lesbian, who knows? Some might be Muslim, who knows? Somebody might live in a poor neighborhood. Somebody's first name might sound Arabic. Profiling, that's not good. That's not good for you. If you're going to the bank, as I did, we have been renovating our house, and I went to my bank, and I said, well, you know, I'm a researcher, and I'm proud of it, and I've luckily not been jobless in my life more than, I think, 3 or 4 months until now. We'll see. So please make me an offer. And then they, you know, they did what they normally you would expect what they would be doing. They ask you many questions about your health status and about all kinds of things. And then I got an offer. And it was really not good. And I have no idea until the present day what it was. I don't even have an Arabic pre-name. My name is Peter, which sounds very Austrian in my names. I have no idea. I have no heart failure. I just got a really bad offer. And the bank accountant, who I know for 20 years now, she couldn't explain to me why. And I said, what have you been doing? And she said, well, you know, this is a program that they made a profile, and I didn't fit the profile. Just didn't. I'm luckily well above median income in Austria. I have no idea. It was something. So I was classified after political attitudes, not in this case. Facebook does it and is selling the data, as we know, from 2016, 2015. You recall these nice issues, Donald Trump's election victory, how that came about. Certainly there was income, religion, sexuality, place, origin, gender, age, all of that went into health, education, that I know. Who knows? What I also know is I didn't fit the norm somehow, obviously. Not the good profile, right? For which I would have gotten more money, a better rate for my credit. By the way, I didn't accept it. I then overruled the algorithm by simply going to the boss of the bank and saying, what's going on here? And I presented my data. And the boss decided differently from the algorithm, which was possible for me. I have 4 academic degrees. I'm earning okay, above average. I'm white, I'm no migrant. What happens to you if you are neither of these? You pay the money, you pay the interest rates that the algorithm is ascribing to you. And there's also an interesting question that this is posing also. This is about the norm. What is the norm and what is the deviation? In Vienna, we have many problems. One problem is that the hard drug market is dominated by Kenyans. Now, Kenyans normally, you can identify relatively quickly in Austria. We have a lot of Turks, who you cannot identify quickly, and people from former Yugoslavia and people from whatever, but Kenyans, most Kenyans are black. And we don't have many black people in Vienna. So you can identify black people, not Kenyans, but black people, and that raises a problem for the police. They know that the drug market is controlled by Kenyans, which are black. Of course, not all Kenyans are drug dealers, but most drug dealers are Kenyans. It's a correlation, it's no causation. It's a typical problem of an algorithm. It's a profiling problem. Because what happens then is racial profiling, of course. They see a black person in the wrong place of town, they frisk the person. It happens all the time. I understand them even. I can understand them, right? But is it right? I don't think so. So what is the norm? What is the deviation? In Kenya, maybe I'm the deviation because I'm white. That will have detrimental effects on me. And what is the standard group? And sometimes it leads to the killing of people. The infamous Skynet program of the CIA led to the killings of quite a few people by drones in Afghanistan, Iraq. And at the beginning, it was trained with the profile, with the data of 7 terrorists, purportedly. Now, you get an idea of that kind of profile that you will get by comparing 7 people. But even if you're comparing 7 million people, you're getting a profile. Now, what happens if you have an Arabic prename, etc., we have been along that alley, and you're fitting the profile? And they're sending a predator drone after you because you're fitting the profile. The boss of Al Jazeera couldn't enter the United States anymore because he was fitting the profile. And they said, well, he must be a terrorist. That's a problem. So, what's the way out? Now I've been telling you that AI is bad to the bone. Obviously, I've been telling you also that I'm using it all the time. But there must be something we can do if we would like to have it, right? Well, one issue is we can look at the producers, the developers. And my first argument would be the argument that makes it possible that we all drive a car on the street. If we have a driving license in a legal way, we are allowed to drive a car, right then? Every grown-up is responsible for his or her own activities. Sounds logical to me. Don't know if you agree, but I think you will do, most likely. The second thing is that science and innovation have legal, ethical, and social consequences on society. Yeah. Okay, we can ascribe to that too. What does that mean when we're thinking about artificial intelligence? What does it mean for responsibility? Who's responsible for side effects on society? Who's responsible for the profiling activities? Where do we have to start to ascribe responsibility to, and where do we have to end? Is it just the CIA? Do we have to start earlier, perhaps? If it's true that science and industry are part of society, then we should also rethink the way that they are dealing with products they are putting out on the market. And since I'm absolutely sure, because I'm dealing a lot with science and people in science and technology, I'm absolutely sure that there are very few amongst them that would like to harm society. My argument would be we would have to create framework conditions that make it possible that they actually are capable of ascribing, of taking over responsibility. That means that they should live under framework conditions that makes it possible for them, and for example, they shouldn't be assessed by one metric. If you're into science and technology, you will know what I mean. The one issue that counts if you would like to make a career in university is your publications and the citations of your publications. That's the one basic issue. It's also grant money, that's really important, but the number one issue is the citations in very many disciplines. That makes it really difficult to think about anything else, about the impact in society. If I'm thinking about the impact in society, I'm not getting any grant money. I'm not going to become a professor. So I have to concentrate on the really important things. And if I'm getting 3-year contracts all the time, and I'm like in my late 30s, I should really hurry up, or otherwise I will end somewhere completely else than I would like to end up, namely in science. Same thing with industry. Industry is not the same thing. It works a little bit differently, but the one thing that we at the moment have in our economic system is we have financial profits as the only way to classify or to evaluate success of a company. The rest is nice to have. Corporate social responsibility, yeah, sure, if we have time. Effects on ecology, of course. If it doesn't harm the profits too much, because it's an international competition and it's an international market, we have to do something to stay in the market, because otherwise everybody's going to be unemployed. So we do what we can, but only what we can, right? So there's an issue there. Don't assess science only by citations, don't assess industry only by financial profits. Users and regulators. Well, I think, and this is also something that we have heard in several presentations today, and I think it's really important to understand that if we're talking about democracy, especially for somebody coming from science. I'm from an applied science-oriented institution, the Austrian Institute of Technology, but nevertheless it's science. It's really important to understand that democracy is not something that is in the books, but that you have to live. And this was the last example from New York, for example, was really a classic example of that. You have to live democracy to make it work, and you have to understand that we have to shape our future together. Otherwise, somebody else is going to shape our future for us. And the GAFA companies are one possibility, one factor that might be shaping or that will shape our future. I'm just talking about them. There are also obviously other actors that would like to shape our futures, from authoritarian regimes. Comrade Putin comes into mind, to Xi Jinping and other friendly people who would like to spring to detonate the European Union, to have a nicer way of dealing with the little nation states that we then are, to completely other. But other actors, but here the issue is artificial intelligence, and here I would like to point out GAFA, the GAFA companies, that at the very moment are shaping the way that we are interacting with each other, that we think about democracy, and that are dealing with governments in one or another way. Sometimes they're teaming up with them at the moment, elected governments. Sometimes they're fighting them, and I'm not sure of which I would be more afraid if I think about it. We is we the people. Where is innovation coming from? My origin is innovation research. Then I went into innovation policy. Then I went into innovation, democratic innovations. Innovations are always coming, almost always coming from civil society and from entrepreneurs, from scientists. They are not coming from governments. No government is decreeing innovation. Governments are very important in the innovation process. As a stream of recent books has been showing us in the last 4 or 5 years, they are creating framework conditions. This makes for a difference. They are regulating innovations, but they're not making real innovations. So we the people, i.e. civil society, have to do something. We have to sensitize governments to our needs. We have to make sure that there's information and education on artificial intelligence. We have to push for reform antitrust regulations. Governments are making half-hearted attempts of doing that, some governments. Not those governments where you have the platform economies located. The last round of that already went through Congress in a very unsatisfying way. Split quasi-monopolist platforms. Stop this talk of, well, you know, we are not trusts because we are not asking any money from you. I think I have like 50 apps on it. Yes, I know I'm stupid. I didn't buy one. I should know better. I didn't, like most of us. Google, Android is for free. It comes with my smartphone. I just take it, I update it. It's great. I'm not paying money, I'm paying data. You all know that. I know it. I do it, right? If this is the case, then we should reformulate our antitrust regulations. Because data, as we know, is just another form of paying for services, right? It's as good as money for them. Reform privacy regulations, regulatory authorities. In Austria, we had a case with the public labor market service that was introducing an algorithm, and it was splitting unemployed people into 3 classes. First class, those that are likely to get a job in the next couple of weeks. Second class, those kind of people that were likely to get jobs in the next couple of months. Third class of people, those kind of people that are not likely to get jobs in the next couple of months. Now, the interesting question is not the classification, although that's also interesting how they did that. They just had 5 classifiers, amongst them, by the way, gender and region. And guess what happened to women who could get children because of their age, or who had children? Of course, minus 10%. And the really interesting thing is what follows from that. And what they proposed, what should follow from it, was totally counterintuitive for me as a social scientist. They proposed that those persons who would get most likely a job in the next couple of weeks should get access to all courses. Those kind of persons that would get access to a job the next couple of months would get access to most courses, and those persons who would most likely not get a job in the next couple of months would get access to just some courses, the cheap ones mainly. Now, they were reifying actually the labor market. totally crazy for me as a social scientist. But that's what they were proposing. We were talking about that in Austria for 1.5 years, only because of COVID it was, that the regulatory authorities got enough time to stop that. Civil society has been pushing for it for more than a year. Stop this. This is discriminatory against women, against people living on the countryside. You can't do that. It took them 1.5 years. It's a bureaucracy. It's like a ministry. It's a hierarchy. GAFAs are not. Algorithms are updated either on a monthly basis, Microsoft on a daily basis, or on the basis of hours, Apple. They are not waiting for 1.5 years. Our regulatory authorities are. So, for thinking about the impact of artificial intelligence, I would propose utilize what we already have. Utilize our analysis techniques that we have been using in other policy fields. Utilize technology assessment, impact assessment, foresight technologies, about thinking about the future. We have all that. It's participatory, by the way, foresight. It's asking experts and laypersons, if the design is right, where the future is going. And also, please use AI, because AI as such is not bad. It's just a question of framework conditions that we need to have, that we and our democracies can thrive with a new set of technologies, because also other technologies that had been framed as the worst thing in the world in the past have not led to the dying off of democracies. However, they have not been as powerful as AI is and might get in the future. Thanks.